And after, okay, okay, we are recording now. So I would like to welcome Cheryl Johncox from Sierra Club, who's going to talk to us tonight about many things related to clean water. She's been very generous that you'll be doing your own slides, Cheryl. So we will start now. Cheryl, will you go ahead and start with your presentation, please?
Thank you so much. Please let me know if you see my slides.
I can see your slide, Cheryl.
Wonderful.
But I am seeing not only your slide, but everything else with it. Okay, now I'm seeing your slide.
First, I would like to thank Kathy Kugler for inviting me to do this presentation for you this evening. I'm very excited to be here and to be able to present to the Miami group about this important issue. I'll be talking about toxic trespass, radioactive waste on our roads, in our water, and in our soil. And I'm an organizer with the Beyond Dirty Fossil Fuels program. I've lived in Ohio my whole life. And I'm a member of the Ohio Brine Task Force, which is a task force that was put together, about 3 years ago, of local community members who live every day exposed to the toxic fluid waste from fracking and oil and gas conventional wells. We're very fortunate to have a lot of very active people, as well as some scientific support for the work that we've done on the Ohio Brine Task Force. So I've been with the Sierra Club. I'm going on my 7th year. I'm based out of the Columbus field office, but as you all probably know, we've been on travel restrictions for a couple of years now. And I'm crossing my fingers that pretty soon I'll be able to give presentations in person. And with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So Ohio has not only a fracking problem, but Ohio has a fracking waste problem. This is a picture of a frack well in Pennsylvania, where they are literally building huge 1-million-gallon above ground swimming pools type enclosures to hold both flowback and produced water that comes up from the fracking process and while the wells operating. So flowback water is the water mostly that comes back very fast, and that's the water that's injected in the ground during the fracking process. And you hear a lot about that water that has a bunch of chemicals. Now we know that they're using PFAS in this water. And then produced water is the water that comes to the surface over the lifetime of the well. So it's actually that water that is naturally in those shale deposits that they are fracking to release the gas. So this is how.
Cheryl,
yes.
I have to, a couple of people have said they can't hear you very well. So I don't know if you need to get your microphone closer or how that works on your end, but I don't want you to make a presentation that folks cannot hear. Thank you.
Is this better?
Would whoever was listening that said they couldn't hear respond now?
Is this better?
It is for me. So we'll go with that. If somebody else gives me another message, I'll interrupt for our own joint good. Thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome. And so that you saw a picture of what Pennsylvania is doing. Unfortunately, Ohio is not in the same realm. This is a picture of a fracking operation actually from an urban well in Cuyahoga County some years ago. And you can see that they're calling this a containment fence around this facility and around this water. And you can see that, it's a plastic snow fence. It's really not designed to keep anybody or anything out. Ohio disposes of about 10 million barrels of radioactive oil and gas waste per year. And just to give you an idea of that amount and what it amounts to, the city of Cincinnati uses 43 billion gallons per year for the entire city and all its residents. That 10 million barrels is equivalent to 42 billion gallons of water per year that is being disposed of in the state of Ohio. Each fracking well now is using an average of 20 million gallons of fresh water during the fracking process. So when I began doing this work in 2012, they were using about 5 million gallons. But because they're having to go deeper and deeper in these deposits, they're currently using an average of 20 million gallons of fresh water. So Ohio, as I said, receives 10 billion barrels per year, and we dispose of that frac waste in a couple of ways. And one of the ways that we're most concerned about here at the Sierra Club is the application of produced water used on our roadways to prevent icing. They also use it for a dust suppressant. And they will use it sometimes, like my county engineer bought 300,000 gallons about 3 years ago, and we aren't able to determine how that was used. But as it stands now, Ohio's been doing this since 1985, and currently local governments have to approve this brine, this radioactive waste. Also, some people call it brine, which I don't normally do because brine, using that word makes it sound like it's harmless, right? It's just oil and water, or oil, or it's water and salt. It's something you put in your turkey. This is not what this material is. So it's, radioactive oil and gas waste. Currently, like as I said, your local municipality has to sign off on the use of this material, and then they have to report it to the Department of Natural Resources that uses a database. I'll go to the next slide. And why does this matter? Why is this important? This is the third General Assembly that the oil and gas industry and private companies have tried to expand the use of this radioactive waste, expand the use of it on our roadways and in our communities. And really, it's about money. And I know a lot of folks are really, concerned and have thrown their hands up in the air about what's going on at the legislature. But I have to say, the Ohio Brine Task Force is such a tenacious group of individuals that we have been successfully able for the last 2 years to stop this legislation and keeping it from passing. It's on hold right now. It's still in the legislature. It's Ohio House Bill 282 and Ohio Senate Bill 171, their companion legislation. And they've been up for committee hearings. They could pass out of committee the next time the committee puts it on their agenda because they've had proponent and opponent testimony. But this particular bill is much, much worse than the bills that we've seen over the last 2 General Assemblies. It literally strips the Ohio Department of Natural Resources from any of their authority to track when, where, and how this material is applied. It would be listed as a commodity, which means that it could be bought and sold just like flour, coffee, and sugar. It would allow radioactive material, radium-226 and 228 that we know is in this, this produced water. It would allow it to contain 333 times the allowable limit right now of that radioactivity. And just for an example, if I owned a radium mine, I would be able to discharge 30 units of measurement for that radioactivity. That's what I would be able to discharge into a waterway for a uranium mine. This legislation would let this material contain 20,000 units and be spread on our roadways. So we're extremely concerned about that. We know from research that this radioactivity builds up in our soils along the roadways. It builds up in our rivers and streams and in the sediment in the bottom of our rivers and streams. We have had some success because we've been advocating the science about this issue for many years, over 6 years now. We were able to persuade the Ohio Department of Transportation this year to not purchase any more of this material to spread on roadways. That doesn't mean local municipalities can't do it, but the Ohio Department of Transportation will not be buying any more of this material. We were also able to get the Ohio Turnpike to stop using this material. We've had discussions with the Department of Natural Resources, and a lot of times we don't see eye to eye with the Department of Natural Resources, but they have agreed. The chief of ODNR issued a letter to the committees hearing these bills, and they're saying that it does not ensure protection of public health and safety nor the environment, they said in this letter. And the Ohio Department of Health has said that they have not studied what long-term exposure could mean to individuals. So we're continuing to fight, and we're continuing to ask people to help us fight this legislation and work with people and members of the General Assembly to try to get all of the use of this material stopped on our roadways and for a dust suppressant. Now, I'd like to just, hopefully this works. I have a little video. This is going to take you to Facebook, and I will show you one of our Brine Task Force members. His name is Tim Kettler. I believe Tim lives in Knox County, and his road is regularly spread with brine as a dust suppressant. So hopefully this little video will work.
And this is what a toxic dust cloud, a radioactive dust cloud from oil and gas brine spread on the road looks like behind a truck. And what it looks like and what a threat it really is to those.
Cheryl,
So
no,
you can- Go ahead.
Cheryl, no picture,
Oh, it didn't come through?
not on my screen. And I had another participant text me that.
Okay, let me see if I can try this one more time. And I will share my screen, and I will share the other screen. Where is it? Where is it? Here it is. Share.
I am seeing it now, Cheryl. No audio on it, though.
Did you see it?
Yes, but I did not hear any audio with it.
So what Tim is saying there is this is what happens when you drive a truck down a dirt road where they're repeatedly spreading oil and gas waste as a dust suppressant. It then becomes a radioactive particle cloud that is released into communities and into homes, because that dust, the radioactivity actually bonds to the soil and then becomes airborne and can be ingested. It also can be tracked into your homes. If you're out walking a dog, if you're walking with your children, it can be tracked into your home on your shoes. So we're really concerned about this legislation, and then we're really concerned about Ohio's continued use of this radioactive material. Here's how you can help. We are still running a campaign to try to get the sponsors of this legislation to pull their support for legislation. There's a 202 number that you'll see on your screen. And oops, sorry about that. And my bar is above it, 202-730 9006. You call that number, you will be patched right through. They'll ask you a couple questions. You can type text into your phone, and they'll patch you right through to your Ohio House member. And you can ask them to please vote against House Bill 282 and tell them that the state needs to stop using radioactive oil and gas waste on our roadways. Another way that you can help is just this past year, the Franklin County passed a resolution prohibiting any use of oil and gas waste within the county. I have an example of that complete resolution if anyone is interested. This is a way for us to show solidarity, even if your community is not spreading brine. It's a way for you to show solidarity for the communities that are fighting this effort and the communities who are living with this substance being spread on their roads on a regular basis. All right, computer, come on, you can do it. This is the other way that Ohio disposes of those 10 million barrels of radioactive oil and gas waste. This is a class 2 injection well. This is an old well in the ground where you see that round fixture right here. This is where the injection actually happens. Trucks will back up to this facility and inject and dump their waste right into that receptacle, and they're pressurized so that this material is then just pushed down into the underground strata, into the rock. Also, you see these condensate tanks. There's condensation that comes up from this pressurized process, and those tanks collect that condensate. As you can see, there is no containment around this facility other than it's just a burn. So any spill that happens and the groundwater is not protected from any type of spill that would happen. And Ohio is taking these 10 billion barrels are coming from not only the fracking process in the state of Ohio, but the majority of the liquid waste from Pennsylvania and West Virginia is also coming to Ohio. It's about 45% currently, about 45% of that comes in from out of state as our fracking has ramped up over the last 5 to 10 years. More and more of that waste is generated right here in the state of Ohio. So these are class 2 injection wells. This is where the injection wells are located in the state of Ohio. You can see this map. And as you may notice, it's very easy to tell that the majority of these facilities are located in the Ohio River Basin. Likewise, the majority of the brine that's spread in Ohio is also spread in the Ohio River Basin. So we have over 220 plus injection wells in the state of Ohio that are receiving this waste. Ironically, Pennsylvania tracks where their waste goes, and we can get that data. So we know that a few years ago, some solid waste was accepted in Hamilton County that was processed and in the Cincinnati area, because Pennsylvania keeps that information. Ohio does not make that information available, and they do not track where once that material leaves that well site, they have a certification for the hauler. But we do not know which injection well ends up taking that material. So there's no way for us to track really how far this toxic material is traveled in the state of Ohio. In November this past year, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources decided to write new rules for injection wells and waste processing facilities. We were very disappointed in the process. We worked with the Ohio Brine Task Force and the Sierra Club, worked with Earth Justice to get expert testimony and provide information about the gaps in their program, provided them with 13 pages of detailed recommendations on how they could improve their regulations through the process of this rulemaking. Our comments were ignored. Not one of them did they actually provide any feedback or say that it was helpful or they were going to use it. They did meet with industry. We have a whole huge laundry list of the times that ODNR took input from industry and used it in making these rules, but they dismissed our comments as irrelevant. So when these new injection wells, they come up for permitting application, the only part that you can appeal is that permit to inject. So just for example, let's say I wanted to open a class 2 injection well, I put it in an application and that application gets public notice. It's not complete. It doesn't tell you how much it's going to take. It doesn't tell you from where. It doesn't tell you what the pressurization is going to be. It doesn't give you any details to actually make an effective comment. But that's the only part that is posted. The only part that you can appeal is the actual permit to inject. There is no public notice on that. So if you happen to be lucky enough to check ODNR's website like 3 times a week, you might find a notice about that permit to inject, and then they give you 15 days to appeal it. 15 days. So they really have closed the Ohio public out of this process. They failed to create a criteria by which they can enforce these rules and levy fines for infractions. Now, this past couple of years, we've had some huge blowouts of injection wells. We had an injection well that blew out in Washington County called the Redbird well that actually traveled over 5 miles to conventional fracking wells when they're actually doing the fracking process and actually leaked into those fracking wells. So it traveled more than 5 miles. We had a blowout at Vito Lake of an old well that had been closed, but the injection wells close to Vito Lake were overpressurized, so they caused an abandoned well to explode and spew materials into a recreational lake. And they're not protective of our families or our environment. They have less than 100-foot setback from private drinking water wells, surface waters, and wetlands. This is awful. As you can see from those pictures of the injection well, if there is a spill and if it happens on a rainy day or it's thousands and thousands of gallons, there's nothing preventing it from getting into our waterways. This is something that we had stumbled on thanks to our amazing partner, Teresa Mills at the Buckeye Environmental Network. Ohio had 36 unregulated fracking solid waste processing facilities. There are no rules to cover that. There have been no rules to cover that. And I can tell you, I saw pictures of the inside of one of these facilities, and it was the scariest. It's the scariest environmental picture that I've ever seen. I wanted to keep these pictures brief, so I didn't put them in here, but there were literally huge holes in the ceilings of this facility. There were holes in the side walls that you could walk through, and they had tons and tons of radioactive filtering agents just stored and leaking on the floor. So they wrote these rules the first time that these facilities have had rules. And it's where, we've been able to get inspection reports from the Department of Natural Resources. They go on a semi-regular basis. Well, these new rules do away with them. There's no need for DNR to inspect anymore. They leave it up to the industry. So imagine, there are just like tons of this radioactive contaminated material, like laying on a concrete floor. We've seen pictures of workers with no PPE, no protective equipment. We've seen pictures of the liquid material in these pits that have evaporated and left the chemical contaminants from the dehydration like snow on the floor, just build up in mounds from these facilities. And now the department is saying that they no longer require DNR inspection, and that they're also are not going to require them to have a radiation protection plan. I think for me, one of the most concerning issues about this is that, again, the lion's share of these facilities are located in the Ohio River basin, which means they're coming downstream to you. The one that we have been paying particularly close attention to, Austin Masters, is literally less than 100 feet from the Ohio River. We have a lot of action coming up this spring about these issues and these problems in the state of Ohio. We're working with our partners right now on a joint campaign plan to really hold the state of Ohio accountable for, I had one of our partners, a volunteer and community member, say to me, we're being poisoned and the state of Ohio is approving that poison. I don't know how much, I reflect back on that, and I think that's what it is. It's state sanctioned poisoning. So we are going to be doing a lot of work on this spring. Obviously, I can't go into detail about it. But this is my contact information right here. If you are interested in getting involved, we are going to need lots of folks to help us in the press. We're going to need lots of folks to help with letters to the editor, lots of folks to help make phone calls. And we're really hoping that this spring we'll be able to turn things around, get some attention in Ohio about the awfulness that's going on with these materials. And that's it. Let's see.
Okay, Brian, would you like to look through the questions or that have been submitted so far? And then I think we will allow people, we have about 18 people looking in right now to just kind of queue up and ask any question of Cheryl or us in Sierra Club as to more information or anything to do with further action that we as the Miami group may want to participate in. Brian, would you maybe take over right now and talk about questions that were asked on the chat thing?
Sure, Kathy. Yeah, I'm going through the chat and some observations. Rich here is pointing out that Nature's Own company produces a large amount of the road treatment, the brine. I'll say the word brine, not supposed to, but we'll get away from that. Are there other major producers of this radioactive product?
There are. So it is produced by every well, right? This is a slick, Nature's Own is a slick marketing scheme that has been marketing their product as ancient seawater and good for the environment and natural as a natural salt product. Very disturbing. And we were fortunate, it was on the shelves in Lowe's Home Improvement Center. And so we managed to be able to, draw attention to it, at least get it off the shelves in the state of Ohio. But there's nothing that's preventing him from selling it in other states as well for a de-icer. I know Indiana actually uses oil field brine as a de-icer. Pennsylvania does. Interestingly enough, West Virginia does not. They have been able to put in legislation that makes it cost prohibitive for a company to use it or their transportation. They put basically an excise tax on it, right? That makes it super expensive in order to use it for road spreading. But there are other companies, right? And so just for an example, so the 300,000 gallons that my local engineering department got, they got it through the Department of Natural Resources. So the Department of Natural Resources actually was like the middleman that facilitated that sale. So there are other, corporations, and they're really just looking for a cheap way to do it. In Pennsylvania, we had companies take it to their wastewater treatment plant, which just showed up. It was up in actually, it was up near, just across from Mahoning County, where Youngstown is. And it did severe damage to their wastewater treatment plant. And then those radionuclides were actually, they picked them up in Pittsburgh's water. So that's not an effective way to do it. There is a lot of recycling that's going on around the country. Well, you know what? We've got so much of it. We've got so much water here. I don't know what it is. Even our lawyers, when we talk to our lawyers in DC, they're like, oh, but they're recycling the majority of it. Not in Ohio. We have so much water here. They just feel like they can just draw and draw and draw and draw and then dump it underground. The only reason injection wells work is because they leak. That's the only reason they work, is because of the natural cracks in the underground strata. There is a huge fault line that runs almost the entire length of the Ohio River. Really, really makes me nervous. And I showed you those condensate tanks. I know Robert was talking about the community torch. And what we've been able to discover from the science is that one of the highest air emissions from the entire fracking process is when this liquid material is being unloaded and loaded from trucks into other vehicles and into injection wells. That's one of the highest emissions of, BTEX, benzene, toluene, xylene, HAPs, hazardous air pollutants. That's one of the biggest peaks in those air emissions. So, it goes so much farther than just, one individual company. It's really all of them, and they're going to be more and more turning to Ohio is our fear. Let's be real, petrochemical or fossil fuels are on their last leg. But they're going to do a ramp up to try to get every single drop that they can and make every single dollar they can. And as long as it's cheap for them to dispose of it here and spread it on our roads, they're going to do it. The only way we can change this is through the rules or through the legislature or through the rules and, the agencies that are charged with regulating these materials. And this goes all the way back to that, the Halliburton loophole. It goes all the way back to the Bush administration that left huge loopholes in the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act that, made special carve-outs that certain sections would not apply to the oil and gas industry.
Here's another question, Cheryl. If you want to find out if your local township or municipality is buying this radioactive waste. Is there a way to find that out?
There absolutely is. So what I would do is actually call your township clerk or the secretary. And you need to be very explicit and not just say brine. That's one of the reasons that we're asking you to be so careful, because if you say, are you buying brine and spreading it on the roads? They're going to say yes, right? Because brine is the stuff you put in your turkey. You want to say oil, liquid oil field waste. Are you buying and spreading liquid oil field waste? The other thing that you can do is you can send me an email, cheryl.johncox@sierraclub.org. We have information, I believe, up to the end of 2019, because as I was saying, the Department of Natural Resources does track which townships are using them. It's just we don't have data. We have to wait till they've uploaded the data, right, into their database system. So we can tell you up to 2019. The other thing you can do is my last, I'm going to put this in the chat. So here's a website, and you can go, and they literally have the list of all of them up through 2019 that are have approved the spreading. That's the latest data that we have. But you know, an easier way may just be to call your township and ask them a question. Are you buying and spreading oil field waste, liquid oil field waste on our roads for de-icing? We've had some pretty, you know, folks have been pretty successful in doing that. And we've had, go ahead.
I was just going to ask another question. Do we know how much money landowners make off of leasing their land to oil and gas fracking operations?
We do not.
It's a lot, I'm sure.
You know, we've had reports of some folks in the millions. We do know that there are a lot of complaints we are seeing because, as it turns out, Ohio's wells have not been as productive as they had thought they were. And the fracking industry has never made a profit, since it began. They've always been in the red, and they keep being able to borrow money, which is why I know y'all have heard about that Stop the Money pipeline, where we're working with banks. So this is a two-prong approach, working with banks and saying, we need you to cut off that credit line. Because if we can cut off that credit line, then, and these companies are not making a profit, they cannot continue to do business.
Are the injection wells monitored in any way?
They're inspected. I believe they're supposed to be inspected once a quarter. We do know that there are not enough inspectors in the state of Ohio, just because of the sheer number that we have of these injection wells. And I believe we have 25, I heard 25 new permits that are new applications for additional wells. So we do know that there is not enough inspectors in the state of Ohio, and would like to see that budget increased. However, the Department of Natural Resources Division of Oil and Gas is what we call agency captured. It runs from the fees that are generated from the permits, the injection, yeah, so they're making they continue to operate because of the fees and the permit applications. So if you're keeping your job because this industry continues to do business, what's your incentive to give them, you know, a fine or shut them down? Or, you know, like the Department of Natural Resources stood up in front of the legislature during this rulemaking and said, we've never issued a violation for any of these solid waste facilities. Like it was proud of them. And so they just simply don't do it. Okay, I see a question that says, if fracking doesn't make a profit, how does it stay in business? Because they continue to have access to money, because banks continue to fund them. As long as they have, as long as they can access new financial investment, they can keep themselves going.
Is there a requirement to notify property owners who are near these injection wells?
There is a notification process, and you know what? I am not sure specifically what that requirement is. It's an interesting word. It's adjacent to, right? And you know how the legislature and rules can be funny. I would be happy to follow up and get that exact information for you. But it is not all of the members. Say if you had a property here and all of the people all the way around you do not need to be notified. So there's a sticky term in there that pre-qualifies who gets notified.
Does anyone gather or keep track of radioactive or chemical contamination after a blowout or an accident of some kind?
So I can tell you that there was a blowout in Noble County the year before last, I believe. And again, it was overpressurization. And it spewed liquid waste into the air for 10 days before they got it capped. The department has said they will not investigate why or how that happened. So there is no requirement.
Okay. We got a note here from Rich, our Legislative Action Committee Chair, who is asking people, this is in the chat, get in touch with Rich if you're concerned about the topic. It's high on the list of, I think as Cheryl has already pointed out, it's high on the list of legislation that the Sierra Club supports. I should say opposes. We support people opposing.
And folks in the Cincinnati area have just been so fantastic. We had a really great response. Thank you to folks in your region. You've been concerned about this issue for years and years and years in fracking. And, we had some great folks submit comments on these new rules. We've had folks making phone calls. I'm just so deeply grateful for all the work that you do and you continue to do down there. It's super important, and I'm really appreciative.
Glad to do it. Here's a question from Gwen. Is the Sierra Club going to make this an issue in the governor's campaign next year?
I can't answer that question because I'm on C3 time. But I will say that somebody who is a former mayor of Cincinnati is in the public record saying they support this as an energy source. So,
yeah. We will not.
Ryan, can I jump in there on that?
Sure.
Ryan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yes.
On that subject of making it an issue in the campaigns for next year, the 2022 campaigns, Gail Lewin, who's our chair of our political committee, she forwarded me the state questionnaire from last year and asked me and the Ohio chapter legislative committee to look at it and advise her on issues that, of concern as we go into the new election cycle. So, that's a good question, and it's something that we can consider on the state legislative committee and get the steering committee involved in it too. So I'll make a point to bring that up at our next state chapter legislative action committee meeting.
Could you repeat what you just said about Cranley's position on this?
Sure, Gwen. He is on record in the Cincinnati newspaper as saying that he supports, this individual supports fracking, and that we should all just get on board. It's a good source of energy.
Okay, I knew I didn't like him.
Here's a question from Joya. How did you get the pictures in your presentation? Pictures of the wells?
So, as I was saying, we have a crazy, incredible coalition. We also work with Frack Tracker. I don't know if any of y'all have heard of Frack Tracker. They are a nationwide organization that grabs data. They take publicly held data information and they turn it into just a treasure trove of information. It's pretty technical, but they also have drones, and they do a lot of drone flyovers and get a lot of drone footage. So none of the pictures that I use in my presentation were taken by Trespass. They were taken from our partners' websites with their permission. They also, ironically enough, so any picture that appears on a report that has been submitted to the state, local, or federal government becomes public domain. So very oftentimes when I'm looking to do a presentation, I will scan, for a better word, scan the information on the web, on the net, and look for that information. So the brine trucks actually got from the state of Iowa. The Pennsylvania well and the water, I actually got from some research articles that are about the process. So there's a lot of way to get that information, and a lot of our partners gather that information, and it's really we really have a good network of sharing, sharing resources in this work.
So you don't go out in the field very much yourself and look at these sites?
I used to. I haven't been out in 2 years, but I was spending a lot of time in the Cincinnati area and also Belmont County area prior to COVID. The Ohio River just is, the central focus of our work on oil and gas industry in the state of Ohio within the last 3 years. Prior to that, it had been all of these huge pipelines that have been going through the state. But really the Ohio River has been the focus. We're working really closely with folks in Pennsylvania and West Virginia and all of this in a coalition. I'm really trying to support each other's work.
Cool. I saw on one of your slides that the Ohio Department of Health is not studying the health impact. Is anyone? I didn't read that entire slide. Is anybody looking into it?
So not particularly in Ohio, which is why it concerns us so much. So they do have a couple of studies, but what they haven't done is the long-term studies that would need to show, what that health impact can say. Now, I don't know if y'all have heard of Dr. Julie Weatherington Rice. Have you heard of Dr. Rice? We work very closely with her. She's a hydrogeologist and has been doing this work for more than 30 some years. And she did her PhD dissertation back in the 1980s on conventional well, brine, conventional waste being used on roadways and looking at exposure. So they've known that this stuff is radioactive for a very long time.
Cool. As question from Robert, is there a published MSDS sheet, material safety data sheet, required by the EPA to identify brine solutions?
So the EPA in the state of Ohio has nothing to do with anything that has to do with oil and gas in the state. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources have what they call sole and exclusive authority for anything and everything that goes on with the oil and gas industry. So that's brine spreading, that's injection wells, that's the waste facilities, it's the actual drilling and conventional well, the compressor stations, all of that stuff that goes on through the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. And so they are required, I believe, the drivers when they're transporting, right? Not when they're spreading, but when they're transporting it, they do have those MSDS sheets, I believe. The problem is that the public doesn't have access to this information, right? I mean, we sometimes wait 2-3 months to get this information from the Department of Natural Resources. And we have to ask very specifically. So like they have a list of all the certified brine haulers. But the interesting thing about this brine, and there's a California study that shows this very, very well, is that every single batch of this stuff is different. And there's no way to say or conclude the safety or the impact to the environment and public health unless you test every single batch. Every single batch of this stuff is going to be different. So yeah, freedom of information. Yeah, unfortunately, there's the public, there's a, gosh, what is it? Is it the community right to know? It's a federal piece of legislation that says that we have a right to know about toxicity. There's a loophole for this industry there as well. It's just really, really hard. Just as from when this started in the state of Ohio, we still don't have a list of the chemicals that are used, right? So there are big gaps in most major environmental legislation where portions of that legislation exempt the oil and gas industry.
Okay. I see Robert has shared the Frac Tracker email in the chat. Info.
Sorry,
yeah.
I was waving at Peggy Berry. Hi, Peggy.
Oh.
She's a member of the Ohio Brine Task Force.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll be talking about brine and PFOS and why they're related to a bunch of nurses on January 20th. So I'm going to pull my slides through you to make sure that you're okay with what it looks like.
We're super excited. Peggy's she's a PhD and an educator and a former chair of the Ohio Nursing Association's Environmental Committee. And just like I was saying, a lot of really dedicated folks working on this, giving their volunteer time to work on this issue.
Yeah, definitely volunteer, that's for sure. And I just want to tell, if I can find him, Richard, I'm going off my local League of Women Voters board, so I'll be able to help you more in June.
Well,
So I can be more political.
we're happy to hear that, Peggy. Sorry for the League of Women Voters losing your.
Yeah, they keep
involvement
asking
in the
me who's
board.
going to replace me, but yeah. And we sued for those. We sued back in what was that, 2012 to get that chemical transparency. It went to the Ohio Supreme Court, and they did not let us have transparency. And I was really concerned about the safety of the workers, as well as for any healthcare staff in the ER who would get somebody who's been exposed. So yeah, we've been doing this a long time, haven't we?
I see a note here from in the chat from Bill. Bill, are you still with us? There you are. So Bill, you've got something to say about the Sierra Club being called a terrorist organization.
Yeah,
That sounds like an interesting story. You want to share that quickly with us?
I'll try to share it quickly. I have one comment about research in this area. I recently retired from the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine, Department of Environmental Health, and we had a researcher who was doing work on hazards associated with people living around fracking sites. If anybody's interested, I could send references, a couple papers. But the industry trying to label Sierra Club as a terrorist organization goes back to when fracking became very popular and widespread. And it turns out there were a lot of injuries as a result of that. If you've ever been on a fracking site, when they're setting up the wells, there's a lot of heavy equipment, and there was an increase in worker injuries as a result of that. And so the OSHA, or the federal government's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, decided to do two things. They wrote some standards to protect workers on these sites, but they also instituted a training program to train workers. And they got some members of industry to help develop this training program, a 40-hour training program for workers. So they had representatives from industry, they had some scientists, they had some industrial hygienists who got together and put together this program. Well, when they rolled it out, I was the director of the Great Lakes OSHA Training Center, and I was invited to the initial presentation of this training. And they had a section on terrorism, which I thought was interesting. And as part of this, they talked about people potentially blowing up drilling sites. And, I listened to it and I thought it was a bunch of BS. And they told a couple of stories about some attempted bombings on some drilling sites out in Colorado. And they said blatantly that the Sierra Club and another environmental organization were responsible for this attempted bombing. And I got so incensed about it that I got up and I called the guy a liar and walked out of the program. Ultimately, I raised all kinds of questions with OSHA about it and convinced them that that was a bogus claim. And they took that part out of the training. But the industry wanted, they're opposed to environmental organizations, and they wanted to give the Sierra Club a black eye through this training program sponsored by the federal government, by OSHA. And ultimately, I got it taken out. I did contact the National Sierra Club's legal office to see if they wanted to engage in any legal fight against it, but ultimately they declined to do that. But I thought that was an interesting attempt by industry to paint the Sierra Club as a terrorist organization. They would have been training if that program ultimately went out, and there were thousands of people who were trained through this program, and all of them would have gone away with the idea that the Sierra Club might be bombing their drill sites, and that would be a hazard to them.
We're pretty used to being a target for propaganda, I have to say.
And Bill, I'll put my email address in the chat. I want whatever research you want to hand over to me, okay?
Okay,
I
I'll
love
get it.
research.
I'll get a copy of the chat.
I'd like to comment on that thing with the Sierra Club terrorist organization. When I was lobbying in the 90s, I learned that Congress thinks all environmental groups are the Sierra Club, and all public citizen represents all of consumer protection. So it just continues to show how little they know about the different organizations, but it's been a generic thing that they've thought for years. And
Mhm.
sometimes I think the Sierra Club tries to take credit for things they're not doing. And maybe that's why the lawyer didn't do the right thing to try to defend the Sierra Club's honor on that. But thank you very much for doing it. Sounds like you've accomplished a lot with that, and it's really appreciated. And I'm glad you told us about it.
Happy to help.
Agreed. Yeah, thanks, Bill. I don't
Actually-
even know if I would want to know how the right wing perceives the Sierra Club or other groups. It would be scary to know how they actually see us.
You just pick up a copy of Marcellus Drilling News. They're often portraying us in uniforms with swastikas on it. Not even joking, unfortunately.
Yikes.
So we're pretty used to that, especially the oil and gas industry is. I don't think there's really any lower they could stoop to.
Robert has an observation in the chat. MSDS, is it right? That's the data sheet we talked about earlier. Is a right to know freedom of information issue.
So we don't have necessarily we don't have a FOIA process in the state of Ohio. We have a records request process. And
They obfuscate that too. Pardon me.
it's really frustrating is what I can say about it. It's really frustrating. And they will take their good old time to get you that information if they give it to you at all. Most of the response that we get is your request is too broad. And because they want us to narrow down it, let's say I said, I want the inspection reports for every injection well for the year of 2019. They would say it's too broad. You need to narrow that down. Well, no, I really want that information, right? So it does take a really, really, really long time. We've done it thinking that seeing the name of Sierra Club on, on this request will make them provide that information in a timely manner. That's not the case. Usually the only way that we get our information in a timely manner, and timely, I'm talking like a month to a month and a half to 2 months, is usually if we have a lawyer request that information, which is unfortunate because it should be just a simple email and filling out a form. Because obviously the average person in the state of Ohio doesn't have that at their disposal.
Okay, well, thank you all for the questions. I kind of skated across the chat window. I might have missed something. Does anybody have any other questions or observations to share?
Just one thing, if you're interested in helping out, like I said, we've got a lot of stuff that's coming up this spring. I'm just going to put my email in the chat. Feel free to send me an email. We'll be hopefully rolling out a campaign across the state this spring to hold the state of Ohio responsible.
Okay.
Thank you
I don't
so
know,
much.
Cheryl, did you let them know to call about Senate bill and House bill that are still in committee? I'm sorry
I
I
still
couldn't make
did.
it sooner. Yes,
Yeah,
good.
I already
We
did,
need
and their
everybody to do that.
political committee is all over it.
Well, I would like to say thank you to Cheryl and all the participants that asked such excellent questions. I learned a lot tonight, and kind of jazzed up to make more calls and participate, because it apparently is the only thing we can do. Our legislative committee and political committee have been working hard to try and find legislators that will protect us, especially when the hen house is protected by the fox. It's a dangerous situation. So thank you very much. I think we're about to close it up for tonight. If there's anything anybody wants to say, either speak now or hold your peace. All right. Good night, everyone.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you, Kathy. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl, so much. Bye.
Good
Good
night,
night,
everybody.
everyone.
Okay. I'm going to stop recording if I can find that. Did somebody already stop the recording? Anybody that's here? I don't see the icon
I don't
anymore.
know. I wouldn't know how to tell if it's been stopped.
Oh, here it is.